Good afternoon. Reading for the part of Brainstorm. Welcome to the Cannabis Community Project. This is Brainstorm, broadcasting live from Denver, Colorado. It's the Grind and Burn Show.
Check, yo. Check, yo, Razor.
Open up, Colorado. It's 420. Time to grind and burn.
This is not your son's stoner show.
Welcome to the Cannabis Community Project, broadcasting live from the Dank Studios, high up in Denver, Colorado, 3835 Elm Street. It's the Grind and Burn Show with your host, Brainstorm. Amazing soy candles, amazing products, candles, sprays, and lotions. Cushly, eliminating odor the natural, organic way. Check them out at www.cushly.com. Are we ready to do this? Are we ready? Let's do this. Welcome, Cannapreneurs. Thank you for joining me once again with another show that I will be hosting this week. Hey, what'd you think of Kate's audition last week? Did she do an all right job? I think she did a great job. She hit the points. She lined up her guest. She did the interview. She gave us an opening intro, a little bit of her thoughts, told us a little bit about her. She seemed strong. I definitely am going to say she is a strong candidate for taking over the role of Brainstorm. But we do have a couple other people who we're going to interject, give some audition time to, and let them also try out behind the mic. It could be you. Just because we have a couple more doesn't mean that's the end of the list. It just means that's all the people that have signed up. There's been more people who have inquired, but very few of them have actually gone through step one. As I explained a few weeks ago about my self-vetting system that I let people vet themselves out by putting them to task, there's only been a few people who have actually taken up the challenge of those tasks and moved forward. Thus, they will be having their auditions come out. So if you like the way Kate sounded and you think that maybe you'd like to throw your hat in the podcasting ring, give me a shout out at brainstorm at cannabiscommunityproject.com. Let me know that you want to be part of the Cannabis Community Project and you want to audition. Here's the assumption, right? You do an audition, you learn the format, you learn how we do it here, you do a good job. Maybe we offer you your own show. Maybe you take over this show. Those are the two paths. Well, I guess three. The third one would be you just drop out altogether and you don't move on in the audition process. But if you are successful and you can dig it and see what's going on and you understand the business model and you are able to be taught, right? You can follow directions and instructions and do a little bit of work. You too could be a podcaster right here on this network. We'll get you a show, or if you're the right one, somebody's going to take over this show right here, the Grind and Burn. Take it over for me as I stretch myself even thinner, pursuing some more business ventures that I'm going to tell you about. Starting ventures is all about just taking action. So if you want to be a podcaster, you want to start a business, you want to be involved on this network, you just need to take action. Too many times do I meet people and run into people who are constantly talking about how they are unable to start because they are not ready. And by not ready means they feel like they're missing something that's not quite perfect to move forward in the first steps. To me, that's just the most detrimental way to start a business. You jump in feet first and you start running. That's the only way to do it. There is no, once I get this, then I'll do this. They're just doing, right? As Yoda says, right? There is no try, just do. So, you want to do something different with your life? You want to express yourself creatively? You want to get into the cannabis community and have a voice? You want to be involved? You want to be in media, broadcasting? Contact me. Contact at cannabiscommunityproject.com. We'll work through the steps with you. But it is work, so don't come looking for me if you're looking for free handouts or looking for me to do the work for you or somehow give you something. I don't care. Even if you're well experienced, there are steps we have to go through, and there's a process and an audition process. Everybody has to go through it, but if you want to do it, put in the work and make something happen, right? It's not that absurd of an idea. You know, when I started this show, it was basically just an afterthought of a marketing campaign to how can we increase some exposure and get involved in the market for a company, a specific company. It was just a marketing idea. Let's do a podcast. Maybe we can build an audience and a way to get a voice out there and do some marketing. Well, that quickly never evolved from a marketing standpoint, and I just went straight into podcasting. Had no money. Matter of fact, I was paying money all along the way. Never got anybody to pay me up front. Had to do all the work, 20, 30 hours a week just to get a 1 hour show out a week. That's how inexperienced and lacking knowledge I had. There was so much work I had to do because there was so much I had to learn. And it was absurd because nobody was paying me to do it. There was no job. There was no more of a connection to a marketing program for a product that had fallen through. There was no reason for me to continue on doing a podcast about cannabis. It was absurd. But yet, here we are going into year number 4, right? And now we have something from nothing, all from just doing some work and holding on to the absurdity. You know, I was talking with a good friend last night about this idea of fitting in the world and corporate America and doing things that are expected within the norm. And then those of us who come up with ideas that are outside of that, ideas that others look at and say, "You're weird, man," or "That's craziness." That is absurdism. So I came across a very interesting philosophy I would like to share with you called absurdism. Now, pay attention, because what we colloquial think words mean and then full developed philosophies mean something different. So the next time somebody says that's an absurd idea, I want you to think about this philosophy. In philosophy, the absurd refers to conflict between the human tendency to seek inherent value and meaning in life and the human inability to find any. In its context, absurd does not mean logically impossible, but rather humanly impossible. The universe and the human mind do not each separately cause the absurd, but rather the absurd arises by the contradictory nature of the two existing simultaneously. Accordingly, absurdism is a philosophical school of thought, stating that the effects of humanity to find inherent meaning will ultimately fail, and hence are absurd, because the sheer amount of information, as well as the vast realm of the unknown, make total certainty impossible. As a philosophy, absurdism furthermore explores the fundamental nature of the absurd and how individuals, once becoming conscious of the absurd, should respond to it. The absurdist philosopher Albert Camus, or Camus, I don't know how to pronounce that, stated that individuals should embrace the absurd condition of human existence while also defiantly continuing to explore the search for meaning. Absurdism shares some concepts in a common theoretical temple with existentialism and nihilism. The difference is, if you're an absurdist, you don't just realize that there's no meaning and it's all pointless. You realize it, laugh at it, and use it as the basis to do what you will with life and make it as you will. Now, I was reading from Wikipedia there, so anybody that wants to follow up and read more about it can go to Wikipedia and find absurdism or any other location of philosophy about that. But this is relevant because I am in the process of not only self-discovery that my whole life I have been an absurd individual, but I am in the process of change now based on absurdism. You see, I've always realized the flaws, and I could quickly see the shortcomings, and I always could see the contradictories and the ironies in situations very quick and very fast, and would come to this nihilistic feeling about life because I always felt like very few people could also see those inconsistencies. And now I'm coming to the conclusion that it's okay to realize it may be meaningless and pointless, and most of our lives are filled up with nonsensical stuff that we do every day. But we can laugh at it, laugh at ourselves, and use it as a philosophy to say, if there is no meaning and nothing has a significant point to it, then we might as well make life what we will in our own view of how we want to live it. So what is this change I am doing from this show to a new business in cannabis? It's based on an absurd idea that I'm just reinventing my life constantly, as I did 3.5 years ago when I started this show and became Brainstorm, a podcast producer and host. Well, before that, I wasn't that. And now I'm realizing I can do something else at the same time because I've become very efficient at producing this show. Over the last 3.5 years, my time needed throughout the week to put out an hour has drastically increased with the learning curve. So I no longer need that 20 to 30 hours to produce a 1-hour show. Now I'm down to about somewhere between 3 and 6 hours. And because of that, I can pursue more business ventures. So it came about organically in the sense that because of the show, I was meeting people in cannabis. And because I was meeting people in cannabis, it came about to me needing to be licensed in cannabis. Not my patient MMJ license that I have, but an MED license to work in the field. And as a result of going through that process, it gave me an idea of something that was lacking in the market, and application help of getting people med badged, as well as retrieving public records to show the MED officials various documentation that you have to show them, which led to the creation of MED Badge Help, the company where we are notary publics and record retrieval and application help. And we help people put together applications and do notary, get their records and everything documentation put together for their MED badge appointments. And that naturally led to my other business that I had been doing for years, almost coming up on 10 years now. Background checks and record retrieval. That is a business that I have quietly been doing for many years, and background checks for employment purposes. And that all in all came together for the idea of adding one more service to round this all out, and that is investigative services. I am currently in process an application here in the state of Colorado for being licensed as a private investigator. I'm going to take all these existing entities of businesses that I'm doing, and I'm going to round it out with one more facet of PI work, surveillance, internal investigations, which naturally will lead to the record retrieval, background checks, and notary public business that I'm already doing. And I already have the foot in, because of this show, to many businesses in the cannabis industry. So I'm going to find my niche, my corner of the market in cannabis as the Cannabis PI. Now, I want you to picture Ace Ventura: Pet Detective and mix that somewhere between, Charles Bronson, Death Wish, somewhere in the middle. Seriously, though, I'm kind of joking about that part, but I'm seriously applying and going to be licensed, as everybody has to do to technically call themselves a private investigator. Here in Colorado, I'm going to focus on the cannabis industry and market myself as a private investigator for the cannabis industry, specializing in background checks, surveillance, investigations, and other investigative services. 1040 investigative services. That's right. PI, you can picture it now. Is there a TV show? Is there a podcast? Of course. Because once you get something in your blood like podcasting, you don't just give it up. It becomes part of you, right? Just like everything I did before podcasting is part of me for my podcasting will now become part of me for my new venture of becoming a licensed private investigator for the cannabis industry here in Colorado. I'm absurd, right? This is an absurd idea. But you know where it comes from? It comes from basically realizing it's pointless. It's meaningless. I apply for jobs I don't really want just because I think I need to get a job and do something where I'm employed by somebody versus working myself. That's craziness. I'd rather be absurd. I'd rather say if it's meaningless and pointless and it doesn't matter what I do or what I don't do, and it's just is, why not make it what I want for myself? Be more fun with it. And I think branching off into this new line of work and exploring cannabis from a new standpoint, not security, right? I'm not going into security, and this is a big distinction. I'm not trying to be a security company. I'm going to be a licensed private investigator. All right. For all you cannapreneurs out there who also find yourselves to be absurd individuals and want to explore this irrational life of absurdism, I invite you to join me in my absurd journey, changing my life, you change your life, and we'll share our experiences together as a community right here on the Cannabis Community Project. Grind and burn. Have you heard a business that inspires you? Have you thought about starting your business idea? Make 2017 the time of now. Don't be a wannapreneur, be a cannapreneur. Contact us at the Cannabis Community Project. Contact me personally. Brainstorm at cannabiscommunityproject.com.
You got me crazy, pulling my heartstrings, a little shaky with your twisting tongue. Your lips of velvet got me dying to taste you, grinning like it's reptile love, and burn like the Bible, and drop that torture too. Oh my God, your body is a liar, baby. What can I do? Now maybe you're an angel, and I'm a fool for you. 'Cause I'm beautiful and wicked. Let's get lost tonight. Beautiful and wicked, dancing in the fire of
Like we always do about this time.
Hello.
Hey, Kristy, it's in Denver.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Okay, how's all the snow? You said you were getting a lot of snow today?
Well, it was starting to snow, but it didn't actually stick, so I decided to venture on into the studio. That's how it is out here in Denver.
Yeah, you guys are probably used to it. I live in Illinois, actually Godfrey, Illinois, and it's kind of part of the metro east of St. Louis, Missouri, but it's also part of southern Illinois. I started out listening to you and a bunch of other podcasts at night to fall asleep because I got sick of the radio station, the radio show I had been listening to for the last 15 years to go to sleep to at night. It went in a direction I wasn't happy with. And then I would wake up every morning to this angry talk show host. And it would really just ruin my day because, I fell asleep listening to something I liked. And 5 a.m. would come around and all of a sudden there's this, angry bullhorn person. And you're you try to go back to sleep. So yeah, I start listening to these podcast so that it would be uninterrupted all night, no matter if I was sleepless or restless or not or what have you. I would be able to, wake up to something that was agreeable and something that would make me happy and go back to sleep calmly and, smoothly.
Excellent. I'm glad my show can put you to sleep.
Yeah, no, it actually doesn't put me to sleep. Sometimes it keeps me awake, which is good because then I get my good creativity wheels thinking. So even at least when I'm laying awake now, it's not just my wheels are spinning for no reason. They're actually spinning in a positive direction. So, and I've actually connected with a few of your guests from previous shows that are just great. Some of the kind of women in the cannabis industry, and they have just been so inviting and welcoming and friendly. And
like who?
Nancy Fingerhood.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's her last name, but she was on shows of yours in 2016 when I first started, within the first few months of when I started listening. And I was just, reached out from the information they gave on your podcast, and just kind of talking to them about, women in the community. And they're actually the ones that told me I should contact you directly because it was your show that they were on, and that, we're a small community. The cannabis community is small, we're trying to actually help each other, and that it's not like a lot of other industries where if you don't know somebody or you're not related or grandfathered in, you're not welcome at the table kind of thing. And so, I just find it really welcoming, the women that I met through there. And we just keep in contact, and I follow all Nancy's videos. I love her Mile High Nancy YouTube channel.
Excellent. Well, that's very encouraging, and I'm so glad to hear that. Let's learn a little bit about you, about Kristy.
Okay. Well, my name is Kristy Patterson, and I am a mother. I am a communications specialist, I guess, by education, by formal education. Not to steal one of your lines, but salesperson by kind of accident, falling into it. No matter how much Googling or how much practical business I had, I kept ending up in the sales part of things and just was never quite satisfied with that. Was always more of the creative type, but wanted to do something with that and looking for my niche. I would say, I'm a media communications specialist, freelance marketer, freelance journalist, a little bit of freelance everything, not paid too well, a little bit underpaid, but always looking for the next creative project, the next thing to spark my creativity, something that I enjoy that I would actually do for free. And so that's kind of what led me to the degree that I went for, marketing and advertising. I used to love, but then I kind of started not loving some of the ways that were preyed upon as consumers. And so that kind of washed over me, and I didn't care for it as much as I used to when I went to college for it. But what I have always had an interest in is cannabis as medication and helping people. And if I'm going to be pushed into a sales arena, helping them into making purchases that will not only help them, that are medicinal, will improve their life, and something that gives me satisfaction. I don't know if that's a little rambling probably, but that's kind of an explanation of some of the things that, I've been into since college. I graduated in 2009, and I have a master's degree in marketing advertising and a bachelor's in public relations. And so a lot of student loan debt and, not a lot of pay. But right now, because I'm disabled, I'm able to just be a kind of a stay-at-home mom and do different creative projects and reach out and do volunteer work and things like that. And that's kind of what I've been using my education for and my creativity for. And this is kind of an offshoot of that. I've been trying to help consult people with just the knowledge I have personally, not as an expert or a medical professional or anything of that nature. Just, how cannabis has helped me medically and how it may be able to help them, and things to do, things not to do for my own personal experiences, and trying to kind of parlay that into what I already know, which is marketing and sales and helping people and volunteering and giving back to the community.
Very good. I have nothing negative to say about rambling because I find myself almost on a daily basis rambling on to somebody. And most of the people I talk to are less than interested in what I'm rambling about. So by all means, feel free to ramble. That's what it's all about.
I appreciate that because usually I'm just rambling to my husband or my 10-year-old. And, I kind of think they don't find things as interesting as I do all the time when I find the hidden hidden clues and marketing messages on TV, and I ruin their favorite commercial or their favorite show because I tell them how it's a farce, that kind of thing. So, we have all this creative energy, and we're looking for outlets, and sometimes we drive the people we love crazy with our need to get it out there into the world.
Well, very good. If you ever need anybody to ramble and rant to, feel free to do it to me because I have the power of editing on my side. So if nothing else, I'll make your rambling and ranting at least sound fluid and smooth and be nicely edited when it comes out the other side.
Oh, I really appreciate that. That is the power of technology, I must say.
Well, tell me right off the bat, since you mentioned it, it's kind of the basis of what I think most of what we're going to talk about will revolve around. You said you're disabled. Do you want to state what your disability is?
Well, I have more than one. Luckily for me, none of them are chronic in the sense that I will eventually die from the disability itself, but they're chronic in the fact that there's chronic pain involved and chronic symptoms all the time. I have rheumatoid arthritis, which I was actually diagnosed with as a child. I'm not exactly sure what age that, some of it is a little foggy memories, but I know I was declared disabled by the state of Missouri in 1980. So, I was only 6 in 1980, so I have vivid memories of a lot of testing and them kind of guinea pigging me a little bit here and there, trying to figure out what was wrong with me symptom-wise because I wasn't walking and I wasn't progressing physically like children do, when they get to 1 and 2 and even 3 and doing those kinds of things. So I guess it took them a while, and they finally diagnosed me with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which as we become an adult, obviously you do not still have JRA, which is always a foggy area when you're speaking with specialists because there is almost this sense of that, well, you had JRA and now you're an adult. You don't have that anymore. Well, it doesn't just disappear. Still rheumatoid arthritis. It kind of morphs into most of what you're dealing with is past damage from your childhood of your joint and minimal to moderate current new damage forming, at least in your early adulthood anyway. Now that I'm over 40, that's a whole different ballgame because, some of that's just wear and tear. That would have happened to all of us. And so that's one of my disabilities. And the other one is fibromyalgia, which is, actually the most fun one because everybody seems to be getting this newest and latest and greatest diagnosis, and they just have no clue what to do with us people that have fibromyalgia. And the best they can tell us is that it's in the autoimmune disease family, which actually says a lot about it, but unfortunately we're not getting very many options treatment-wise, so those are limited. And then I also suffer from PTSD, or what they might call CPTSD. They put a C in parentheses in front of it for continuing or compounded, or just in the sense that it's PTSD where you're triggered because something is continuing to happen. More or less, you're still interacting with, on some level, the things that trigger you. Whereas if you go off to war and, or some event that happened in the past, it happens and then it's over and it's not continuing to happen because you're no longer, as a soldier, just for an example, you're no longer in war, you're at home with your family now. And those are the two main ones, or the three main ones, I'm sorry. And then I guess on the psychiatric side, I'd have been diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. And that's only relatively recent in the past few years. And they still muddle with that because they're absolutely stunned and amazed that I'm not on massive doses of pharmaceutical medication and that I'm functioning properly. So they keep diagnosing me with it and then taking it away and then saying it again. And, anytime I have what they will call an episode, So I guess those are my big four, and those are my disabilities. But what I'm chronically disabled with, or labeled by the state as my main disability, is my rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow.
So that's more rambling for you there.
It's a list there.
It is. And they all play off of one another. So it's, some days are really interesting in a comical way, and some days are really interesting in a, you just want to hope this day ends as soon as possible kind of way.
So how much of that do you want to talk about in relationship to what cannabis does to help alleviate that? I mean, you're free to go as deep as you would like into the world of what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, and then bring it back around to how cannabis is helping that. You're free to take this conversation wherever you would like to. I don't want to push you too much, but I would like you to share as much as you can, just for the purpose of maybe somebody else hearing what you have to say and finding relief or inspiration in it. But whatever you're comfortable with, can you tell me a little bit more as the story goes along?
I appreciate that, the opportunity, and I'll just kind of start telling you a little bit more and see where the conversation takes me as far as how deep I'll go. But I would say, a lot of what cannabis does for me is gives me a sense of mentally, I get more on an even keel. I'll say that. Now, I am a user from when I was in my early 20s, in my 30s, I was trying to medicate with it back then, but unfortunately was not having access to the right things, knowing what the proper things were to use. I've known about it used as medication since, at least early to mid-90s, when it became popular in California because I followed it for so long because I grew up around it, for good or for bad. I grew up around the smell of it, the culture, the everything. I knew the fun side and I knew what I had seen it used for, but I also knew there was medicine in there as well. I was kind of always searching and not finding until I was able to go to California, and I believe it was 2000. It was about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, and I was able to get a medical card while I was there, and it just changed my perspective on using it as a treatment for, first and foremost, my pain, but then my depression, because the pain and the depression go hand in hand. Unfortunately, because I've had this type of chronic pain in my joints, chronic pain throughout the growing process and everything as a child, I've always suffered a little bit of sadness, a little bit of you're left behind, you're not able to do some things that some of the other children are able to do. So, there's a little bit of stress and anxiety, and you can probably hear it in my voice now, as I talk about it. But there's a lot of emotion that comes along with being that child. I've always been kind of a high stress, high anxiety type of person. And then that coupled with the circumstances of life and what I experienced growing up that had nothing to do with physical disability or illness, just the household I was raised in general, compounded that stress and compounded all those feelings of not being as good as the other kids, or, all those things that would add to depression even if you weren't predispositioned to it genetically, which I am.
Right.
Finding medical cannabis, and like I said, in about 5 years ago or so, through going to California, it just opened my eyes to that. This is what I was searching for, and thought at some point I was kidding myself, I am one of those people that's just kidding myself, and I just want to be high, and people would say, you just want to be high, just admit it. And to some extent, don't we all want to feel better? But, really,
right.
Really what I'm dealing with is wanting to get relief from my symptoms, relief from the day-to-day pain and the day-to-day depression and things of that nature that you deal with. And I was able to find, once I was able to have medicinal cannabis, I was able to find that I didn't need to do something that made me so high I couldn't function, or I felt like I was impaired.
Right.
I could just find that level and maintain, find that level that puts me in the, I've medicated a little bit, and now I feel, that I can do what it is I need to do today. I can go to the grocery store. I can pick my son up. I can, sometimes it's just the little things of getting through those when you're in pain or when you're having a bad day, mentally, or just, we all have those days. People with depression tend to have more maybe than others, so it's a constant battle.
Absolutely. Do you take any other medication, prescription-wise?
I do not currently, although I have been on a myriad of them in the past. So I do not, because I can only speak for myself and my own experience. I cannot necessarily advocate for others, but I can say that I have tried whatever they were willing to put me on initially, especially within the last 10 years. Yeah, I've been on so many I can't remember, unfortunately, which is kind of also comical, some of the names of them, because that's one of the side effects, not of the cannabis, but of the actual pharmaceuticals that they were putting me on for my depression and anxiety, that I just was so spaced out and so forgetful and so kind of almost out-of-body experience all the time.
Did you take yourself off of them?
I did, against the judgment of some of my doctors, and I had a couple that were on my side because they had seen me have to go into the emergency room, almost overdosed on the amounts of medication for stress, medication for depression, medication for like prednisone for swelling for my RA and my fibromyalgia, those conditions. And then you have a combination of all of those things. Everybody's a delicate snowflake and our bodies take things differently. But in my particular case, it was a bad combination. It was too many pills or too high of milligram or on it too long or whatever. It was causing more and more severe, I would say, breaks from reality, breaks from being able to function and feeling like yourself, feeling like any semblance of how you remembered yourself. And I know that, a lot of the fight against me going off of them through one of my psychiatrists in particular was that that's the hallmark of a depressive personality is you don't want to take your meds and you think that we're giving you the wrong things. But in reality, I was ending up at the ER with more panic and more anxiety while I was taking those meds, and I had never had to do that in my life before. I had always found it maybe unhealthy or healthy either way. I'd found other ways to cope without that happening. I'd never been on those things before.
When it comes to taking meds and a person wanting to take meds, although it may be true that somebody not wanting to take their meds may be a symptom of a depressive personality, can it really come from the person who's supplying those meds, though? I mean, isn't that a conflict of, how you look at the situation, that if you're the person supplying those meds, how can you also be the person to say that stopping taking those meds is a symptom of depressive personality? I mean, I don't understand how that works.
Well, precisely. And actually, I like that you're saying it in almost those words because I said something so very similar to my psychiatrist at the time. And, she more or less, verbally rolled her eyes at me. You know what I mean? She kind of, oh, of course you would say that kind of attitude. So it was just kind of a losing battle. And at that point, I had been seeing that psychiatrist and another psychiatrist, I guess a total of like 3 or 4 years, on different meds, off different meds. And this was all from 2010 to I'd say 14, almost 15, back and forth. And I just had finally had enough when every time I suggested anything else or trying anything else, they just wanted to give me more medication when I would want to do talk therapy. And so I just kept advocating to the psychiatrists who were pushing the pills on me that I wanted talk therapy, that I knew I had problems, I knew I had issues that would work out beyond just what my genetic predisposition to depression or what have you would be. So could they help me with that? And they tried, but my insurance isn't that great. And it took me a while to find, to get them to accept that I felt that would help me better. And medical cannabis, although it was not legal in my state at the time, I still wanted to explore the avenue with them if they would be open to discussing that. When they weren't open to discussing that, they were really more open to making little notes in their pad that I, may have a psychological addiction to cannabis. And it was just very reefer madness, and I couldn't. And I'm a little bit of, a sad clown comedian at heart, and it brought so many jokes to mind of this is really my life. This is what I have to deal with. This is the best you can offer me.
I have a psychological addiction to cannabis like I have a biological addiction to food. I may be addicted to both of them, but not consuming them isn't going to make my health any better either. I'm not sure if that's a plus or a negative to be classified as psychologically addicted to cannabis.
That's not even a formal diagnosis, by the way, not to cut you off, but that terminology is not a formal diagnosis. That's not even in the book. I could tell you other stories and maybe for another time, but I know why that's not a formal diagnosis. I had to take one of those tests in the past, and I know what they're called, and that's not it. So this woman was getting ready to leave this practice that she was in that took my crappy insurance and open up her real dream practice, you know what I mean? And she just wanted to be done with it already, and she passed me on to this young guy who could barely speak English, and he was so nice, and he tried so hard, but when I talked to him about some of the things of why I felt I had the trauma and things like that, I just don't think he could handle it. Right. And he just thought maybe I just needed to get the right dosage of Xanax in me, and things would just look a lot rosier for me or so.
Well, I mean, you do acknowledge that, when one's dealing with trauma or depression or anything else, there is the medication side, whether it's cannabis or something else, but then there's also a therapy side, right, that has to be dealt with where you actually have to deal with the issues themselves rather than just deal with them from a medication standpoint, yes?
Yes, 110%. Here's the problem, and what that I find anyway, is that one hand does not know what the other hand is doing. Just like in the medical profession, when you have two different specialists, one doesn't even know or care what pills the other one's giving you, unless for some miracle of reason you've got those two to communicate. Well, it's the same way in the psychological services, at least on the end that my personal experience dealing with it, was that what would happen is, I would talk to the psychiatrist, and yes, they would listen, and, they blocked my 20 minutes aside for renewing my prescription, and they'd let me yammer on for that 20 minutes while they blankly stared and did notes or nodded in approval or whatever in disapproval. But, I kept saying I want talk therapy. Can we find someone who will take my insurance? And they were just like, they couldn't seem to help me. And at first they put me with a child psychologist, which was fine because a lot of my trauma was from childhood. But the problem is I think she thought I was a pathological liar because some of the things I was telling her, I know when I said out loud, sounded really outrageous. That's why I hadn't talked to anyone about it. So, I think it was a little overwhelming because she was literally used to dealing with children in different situations, not an adult who this has already happened to, and now I'm the end result of what you're trying to hope these kids don't turn out to be. It seemed like the before and after of what she didn't want. I just think it was too overwhelming for her, and it wasn't a fit. Anyway, I would go into her office and I'd be an adult pouring my heart out, and I'm literally surrounded by children's toys. And sometimes that was soothing, and sometimes it was just creepy and not right for the moment, There was a lot of feelings there, and she never addressed that we were sitting in an office filled with toys either. It was almost like I wanted to talk about the fact that why was I sent to her, and she didn't want to acknowledge that at all, Like, why didn't they have me go to someone specializing in I'm an adult now, Let's get it, someone who's dealing with that.
Do you feel like this aspect of your life, you're dealing with trauma and depression, is an overwhelming guiding part of who you are, what you do, and how things have accumulated up to this point in your life?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, I used to think when I was younger that it was my physical disability that defined me because of all the things that it did physically hold me back from doing. But in reality, as an adult, and now that I have gotten talk therapy and have been consistently in it now, or at least as consistent as possible off and on for the last 5 years, my insurance, I found that it's really the crap from the past. It's the stuff that, causes the depression or compounds the depression, I should say. I think I probably had the depression anyway as a child, but I was compounded on and added on to and piled on to by all of my experiences. And it may have been, it could have been a lot more mild potentially than what I'm dealing with. Most of what I deal with is more on the PTSD side of things than it is my behaviors. The things that they call bipolar that I do, or ways I behave, or ways that I may react to situations in life that they may consider bipolar, are really just ways that I, reacted as you learn improper, you learn bad habits, bad coping skills, and they work for you as a child, and they work for you for so long, and you continue to use them into adulthood, and they don't work anymore, but you don't know anything else. So
you're bipolar in the sense that you have extreme highs and extreme lows.
Yeah, and extreme highs, they have a hard time pinpointing that with me because a lot of times when people have extreme highs, especially with this bipolar one that they keep telling me I have, I should be manic in a sense that I should be physically up a lot. Well, I have always had a baseline of what I can do physically anyway. So what happens in my case is I cannot express it physically. So I express it mentally, which for me means it goes internally because, you're trying to look for a creative outlet. And when I was younger, I did a lot of writing. And I also took 8 years from junior college to getting my master's degree to go through school. And part of why it took me so long was because I was comfortable there, and it gave me something every day to do with my creativity that I could depend on to keep my sanity intact. So once that was over in 2009, when I was no longer a student, that was a big part of my identity. It kept me grounded. I had to find new outlets for my creativity, and those outlets were supposed to be getting a career and a job. Well, my physical disability took over at that point because I was a new mother, and my pregnancy was wonderful, but the actual birth of my son was very hard on my body, and it kick-started my physical diseases and compounded and added a new one, which was fibromyalgia, somewhere along the way. I suffered postpartum depression, as a lot of mothers do anyway, but mine was, may or may not, I can't gauge if it was worse or not. It was there, and I feared it would be there because I already knew I had depression long before I was diagnosed with depression. It took me years to go to have someone tell me what I already knew, so... sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there.
I'm so glad that you're willing to reveal your story here. I can relate to so much of it and identify with a lot of what you're talking about, especially with the academia of kind of immersing yourself in a world, looking for a creative outlet, and using the title of student in academia as kind of a harbor where you spend your time and somehow try to express creativity through academic studies.
I was such an excellent student. I mean, as a matter of fact, it was like I was proud of myself because I was a terrible student growing up. I didn't care what was going on. I didn't care about anything that was going on in school until I was in college. I just skated through, and I was smart enough to get away with it. I figured out all the little angles, and I just got by. And then when I started going to college and was paying for it, even though some of it I got scholarships or government grants, I still had to pay for the bulk of my higher education. I had to take loans out, and it wasn't about the money. I didn't pay attention because my money was on the line. I paid attention because finally somebody was speaking to me about something I was interested in, and they were interested in my opinion, and growing up in my particular situation in my household, that was not something you got a lot of. That's definitely where I got a lot of self-confidence and being in the academic world. But I loved being a student. I enjoyed it. I was on the honor roll. I did whatever I could do to keep my grades as high as possible, and I worked really hard on my projects, and so it was kind of a big blow. It was a lot of change going on that I didn't see coming all at the same time. I had my son in 2007, and I took a whole year off of my academic career to raise him for about a year, just over a year, and then went back and finished my master's when he was, between a year and two. And that was a little challenging, but actually it was good because I needed to be away and have my own time, and I was doing something constructive, but I was still dealing with the after effects of having him and how that was taking a toll physically. And I think I just physically and mentally pushed myself so hard that last year toward getting and finishing up that master's degree with hopes that dream, the American dream, the dream of going to be at a desk and I'm going to have this job, and you have this idea in your mind, and reality and what they tell you or what you're sold or what you buy into always turn out in the long run. I had that, going to school, then leaving school, dealing with my disabilities, kind of flaring up. And then also in 2009, my husband and I lost our home in the mortgage crisis right after I graduated, within 3 months, and our son was just 2 years old. And so I had a lot of mental shocks, little mini waves of change that I had no control over happening, all at the same time. And I was able to, most of the time in that 8 years while I was in school, stave off my depression or hide it or mask it or use it to delve into some project that I had to get, the best grade on. And once all those things were taken away and my home, that my husband and I had bought and tried really in a nice enough area where we could have sent to public schools and all that kind of thing, the dream that we had, and all that was just kind of being ripped away. So that caused kind of a tailspin of my depression. And as I led down the road of taking the advice of psychiatrists, and finally, after years of not trusting doctors because of my experiences in my childhood, saying, okay, I'm at your mercy, I'm in your hands, just having this experience after experience of being diagnosed and misdiagnosed and re-diagnosed, and you're manic, you're bipolar, you're this depressive, you don't have depression at all, you have a other disorder, but we don't know what it is. It just got to be kind of where at some point I was like, I just need to talk to someone. I just need a therapist. If someone is qualified and will treat me with kindness and respect and also listen to me and actually believe what I'm saying, that would be great. If you can give me any of those things. So I fought for a couple years to find mental health. And I had a little bit before I moved away, moved from St. Louis to Illinois. And like I said, I've lived over here now for, I guess, about 7 years, so since 2010. And I had seen a therapist a little bit off and on before then when I found out we were losing our house. I was able to find a kind of an emergency therapist for women who had suffered domestic abuse in the past. And I qualified for that program, and my help was free, and these women were great. And I was only able to stay with them for about 3 or 4 months before we had to move to Illinois because we lost, we were losing our home and we had to move somewhere else. And
let me ask you this, one of the more important questions. In spite of all of this, the struggle and the barriers and the heartaches and the setbacks, where and how do you find energy to keep moving forward?
That's a good question. People don't usually ask me that, to be honest with you. I ask myself that all the time. Outside of the therapeutic world, I should say, people don't ask me that. Some of it is just like, well, what else can you do? What's the... I hate to sound like, someone from old Hollywood, but what's the alternative? Not living, not being here, not finding a way to fight through whatever you have to fight through really is the only other alternative.
But isn't that the alternative? Isn't that exactly what defines the depression and that type of...
because I am someone who suffers from depression, you're unfortunately, and I listen to another podcast that I really love that talks about depression, and there's a lot of comedians that have depression, and they have a lot of insight, and I really tune in and touch a lot more with my own depression based on these other people's stories, which is also why I am sharing this much and probably oversharing, because if one person that listens to this just identifies with one thing I say and says to themselves, oh my gosh, it's not just me, I'm not just out there trying to figure it out and out there using cannabis to help my depression and to help my PTSD, and maybe I don't have everybody in my life that I love on board with that, or maybe I still have to hide the fact that I do that, or maybe whatever their circumstances. If it helps anyone, if it makes anyone feel more comfortable in their own skin. When you have depression, feeling comfortable in your own skin is a big deal. Sharing your story with other people and letting them identify with you and you identifying with them. When you ask me, what drives you to move on? My son, for one, I chose to be a mother. He was not, it wasn't oops, now we're pregnant. We really planned for him, and I was old enough. I had experienced enough of the go out and do stupid things while we're young part of my life, and, where I wasn't going to feel like now I'm going to spend all this time mothering and being at home, and now I'm feeling left out. I see how those results work out for a lot of people, sometimes not to their own, fault or whatever, but we really planned for him. So, being a mother is really, in my dark times when I deal with it the most, that's the driving force of, you have to be all right for my child, my son, I have to be all right for him. He has to be all right.
If you didn't have your son, do you have a support system to fulfill that need?
I do because I've worked hard to have one, and it's not been easy. I've had to let go of a lot of toxic people in my life, people that I've been close to for a long time, people that I was related to, people that I thought were my people. But turns out, sometimes somebody else's stuff is so overwhelming that you can't deal with your own stuff and their stuff at the same time. So I've learned to try to surround myself with enough positive people and enough people that in a pinch, or if I really felt like really down, I could call them and say, I have got to talk to somebody. I have got to tell you what's going on with me right now because I feel so very overwhelmed. And I will say one of the people that I do reach out to a lot is my mother-in-law, and which is kind of funny because I think out of all the people that I know that are in my life right now, I'm most worried about how she would and or will respond to the fact that, I used cannabis as my medicine, so she's someone I hold in high esteem, and if you knew her, you would think she'd be on board with it right away, but also there are parts of her that are very conservative, and my husband works for her company, so it's kind of one of those things where it's all in the family, and you don't want to upset the apple cart, but you're trying to be honest. She doesn't know. A lot of the people in my life, I would say, in my immediate life, in my circle, in my world, 90% of them know this is me, this is what I use for medicine, this is not affecting anything other than the fact that you happen to have this now. People know you in different ways in your life, and it's just not something I've ever discussed openly with certain people, and she would be one of them. And she's someone I rely on a lot for, common sense and wisdom and, mental stability. And so I've never known how she may react to it, and I've always been afraid to say anything to her about it because I respect her opinion. And if she didn't agree with it, it would be very upsetting because it would be a strain on that relationship.
Well, it's ironic you said that because on the other line, we have your mother right now. No.
Yeah, actually in my life, that would be how it would be. And that would probably be better than the private conversation I would have to have with her. I will have to have with her at some point because I'm so uncomfortable when I have to talk to someone who's so mentally grounded and such a together person, and I always feel like I'm not such a together person. So it's always hard to speak to someone. You feel I feel like a child, okay, now I have to tell you something and you might not like it. And, instead of being able to just say, I would like to have this adult conversation with you, and however that would go, it's just one of those things.
Would you like to make a statement to her? And then we can send her the audio clip for her to listen to. Would you like her to listen to this show?
I don't know if she's ready for the show yet. I think I would want her to know that what I'm using for medicine before I would want her to hear everything that I've said on the show, although she does know some portion of it because, like I said, she is someone that I rely on as a confidant, and she has enough knowledge of the history of my background and my childhood and whatnot that she is actually one person that tells me that she thinks, I'm doing a good job as a mother, and, and that she gives me compliments that I'm not used to. And from coming from my biological family, so right. Confidence boosters.
In a weird way, it's encouraging to see that there's still that one thing in your life that you still have that fear that you're still trying to figure out how to tackle. Because in a weird way, that's almost encouraging for other people who are just trying to get to that point where they can see that even though you have the strength to move forward and be a spotlight for other people, that there's still issues you're dealing with today, and they're pretty basic, fundamental, like mother issues.
Yes, definitely. And honestly, now if this were my actual biological mother, this is my mother-in-law. My biological mother, I could tell her anything about me. As a matter of fact, the more horrible, the better. She'll be right on board and understand. But we grew up from a different cloth than some others have. We all have different life experiences. I think part of why I'm trying to do this and advocate as much as I am for medical cannabis is because I don't know what the terminology is. I would like to be able to come out of the basement once and for all, Right. I'm just tired of hiding, and I live in a state where it's medically legal, but there's still so much stigma. There's still so much ignorance. There's still so much, really, I hate to keep saying, I know I've referenced this before, but reefer madness, just mentality. Oh, you'll forget your child's name, or those people that do that thing, they can't be good people. There's a lot of that.
If you want to actually make a confrontation about it and you would like to do it on the show and reveal once and for all to your family and everybody else, it might be very therapeutic, but it would be great podcasting. So, if you ever get to that point where you're feeling the courage and you want to do it, maybe you can do it over the phone and we can record it.
I think I would like to do that. I'm just not 100% ready, totally out myself, and it makes me kind of, on some level, feel like a fraud because I'm so trying to help other people and telling them to not be shameful of their decision to use it as medicine when I myself am still grappling with the idea of fully being who I really am. Isn't that what we're all grappling with? I mean, really, we're just trying to really be who we are, and it seems like people don't want to let us, but really we don't want to let ourselves because we're worried about being judged. And that's just a hard one. That's a tough one. Nobody wants to be prejudged, and nobody wants to be judged, especially, I hate to say, people who smoke. I mean, there's still just such an idea in the head of what it is. and not everywhere, and luckily not in Denver, which I love, Colorado. I have some relatives that live there, and we get to go visit, and I just love the state, and I love just being able to feel like I'm just somewhere where I feel comfortable, where I don't feel like if I'm talking about it openly, I have to, hush or whisper or whatever, just whatever, any multitude of things.
You just revealed that you have relation to Denver, so I would expect you to be here in person next time.
Oh, that would be lovely. Yes, I do. I visited last summer, and I'm hoping to go again. And now my husband would like to go in the wintertime because he would like to go tobogganing or some crazy thing on a sled down a mountain. I'm just going to sip cocoa and maybe vape and medicate and watch and hope that he gets some health care before he makes that decision.
You're always welcome. It's an open invitation. Come out to Denver. Come hang out. Come hang out at the studio. Come smoke. I mean, I'm feeling very positive about where you're headed in this direction. Where can you close out with a future outlook? Where does your life as a patient, an advocate, a mother, a person, where do you see the next 18 to 36 months for you?
Oh, well, I would say my immediate goals are that I am trying to and hoping to put together my own podcast in the near future, something that kind of speaks to my area about not just cannabis, not just cannabis issues and medical cannabis, but just kind of a little bit of everything of this town, this life, this Midwestern small town feel. I've grown up in a couple different small towns now and my whole been on here, and I'd like to be able to speak to that community, speak to them about medical cannabis as a medicine opposed to the ideas that we have out there. I'd like to keep them informed on what's going on legislatively, because these are things I'm interested in. So I'm basically just I'm being a little selfish here. I'm just taking all of the things that I'm interested in and about the cannabis industry, and a lot of them are topics that you cover on your podcast, and that's what really sparked my imagination. These are like things that I've thought about and I didn't even know exist, and you've had people on talking about them, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these ideas in my head, they're real, they're out there, and I want to share them with people. I want to share what's going on, the good, bad, and the ugly of if you're a medical cannabis user in the state of Illinois, how will you be affected by whatever's coming down the pike legislatively, by people in your community, by how far away you have to drive to get your medicine. I mean, these small towns, we have to go so far. And then sometimes we have to deal with really snarky people when we get there that aren't patients themselves and really can't properly advise you. And we have to do a lot of self-counseling. And my idea for podcasting, after listening to many podcasts for months and months and months, going to the dispensary and having people just openly ask me questions and then be shushed by the guard standing there in the dispensary. It's just, it's almost like it feels like a suppression of information for whatever reason. And I don't ever agree with that on any level. I think information is power. And no matter what you're informing someone about, no such thing as too much information. You have to have it out there so people can form proper opinions and also just know what they're dealing with, know what they're spending their money on when they go into a dispensary in rural town, Illinois, and they've never even seen oil or they've never seen wax and they don't know how to dab and they think it's like smoking crack and they're terrified and they have people telling them horror stories of edibles and, what might happen to you. My goal in the next, like I said, 18 to 36 months is get a podcast of my own out there that can speak to those people, these people in my area and small towns anywhere, because I would hope that, if I ever get listeners, that they would be maybe a few beyond the tiny little town I live in that might help them too. But spreading the information.
That's perfect. I love it. And you know what? I'm going to take it a step further and I'm going to say this. I'm going to use our conversation today as your audition, and I'm going to give you an open invitation that if you would like to formulate that podcast and have it created right here on the Cannabis Community Project, I would be happy to take it on as producer and help you create and format that podcast and get that out there in the world well beyond your Illinois experience, because podcasting is not about geographical location. Once you get it on the internet, you get fans from all over the world, and that's the way it works. So it's an open invitation to you. I heard enough here today to know that you have everything that it takes to make a podcast like that successful, and I would love to be involved and help you produce that.
Oh, well, I really, really appreciate that. And thank you so much for saying that. I know I'm not formally experienced in podcasting, but, being in media, I've literally done a little bit of everything, even college radio for a time. So this is not completely out of my wheelhouse, but it is a little daunting, like I said, dealing with all the things that I do deal with on a day-to-day basis, but I am very motivated, and I love your offer, and I'm going to be taking you up on that because I definitely need a little bit of guidance. None of us want to just be flying blind, and it's nice to have someone that's on your side and that understands what you're trying to do and takes it seriously. We don't get a lot of that here in small-town America in the cannabis community. We are still very much hiding in our bedrooms, blowing smoke out of our windows and going, I hope the kids don't smell my medicine, and it's just still very in the infancy stages here, and we need a lot of help getting a little bit more reality-based information out there. There's a lot of scary stuff being said in the media right now, without getting into politics. I'm sure you're aware. I know you're aware of it too. And I hear it in the dispensaries, and it upsets me to hear these poor people in there going to get medicine, listening to something that they've heard, in the media and going, and now I'm worried if I should be even using it, if I should take this certain thing.
Well, very good. I mean, I think that right there is the basis, all we need. Please do take me up on that offer. Let's get it put together. Do you have a name yet?
I do actually have a name. I always am a person who gets a little ahead of myself on the creative side. The name will be Flames Fire Talk.
All right. Flames Fire Talk with Kristy. Coming soon on the Cannabis Community Project. We're going to make it happen. I can see it. I think you have everything that's there. Let's make it happen.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed, and hope I didn't overshare too much. And
you can't overshare too much, but if you want to keep sharing, we also have a blog page you're more than welcome to contribute to in a text form. And once we get that podcast up and going, you will have an audio platform to express yourself creatively. Creatively?
No, I appreciate that for the blog because sometimes I'm better in print than I am live. My ideas are able to gel a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, this has been great. And what I would like to ask you to do is to give some type of contact information because there might be people who have heard your story and want to reach out to you to maybe get some strength, inspiration, or just some help directly from you with their own personal situation, whether it's dealing with depression or dealing with medical ailments or just dealing with life in general. You might have inspired people, so where can they get a hold of you?
Oh, I appreciate that. Yes, I invite anyone who would like to email me to do so with questions, comments, complaints, what have you. The email address is flamesfiretalk@gmail.com. I don't know if I need to spell that out, if that was coming through clear enough.
Well, let's spell it anyways, just because we are in America, so spelling may not be a thing.
Okay, so it's Flames Fire Talk. It's FLAMESFIRETALK @gmail.com.
Excellent. And are you on Facebook or any other public forums, social media that you would like people to connect with?
I am. I am on Instagram as Kristy is Flame, and I'm on Facebook and find me there. I am Kristy Patterson. You could probably just look me up. My account's not private because, apparently that's not important to me, privacy on Facebook. And even though I always constantly have to go on and delete people, and someday I'll get on board with that. I only wrote my master's thesis on Facebook. I guess I'll get on board someday.
Well, very good. I have had a great conversation with you. I really appreciate your time, your openness, your honesty, telling your story, being a little vulnerable, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate you allowing me, this time. The opportunity is not going to be wasted, and I think that we all make connections with people in life that we are supposed to know for whatever reason. I'm looking forward to our future interactions.
Excellent, and look forward to the future podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Okay, thank you. You have a great weekend too. Bye-bye.
Bye. There you go, Cannapreneurs, on our way out. And thank you for joining us for another show. We'll be back next week talking to more Cannapreneurs, bringing their stories to you. Follow us after the shows on all the social media, Facebook, YouTube, Massroots, even Twitter, all under the same name, CannabisCommunityProject.com. We'll see you next week.
I'm